As Chantal mentioned, I recently joined the Hub about a month ago as a designer, product advisor. And one of the things that we wanted to do as I'm getting started here is just sort of do a foundations of product management webinars and workshop series to give people an introduction to my skill set, but also hopefully share some knowledge based on my experience that will help people move forward. Today, we're going to talk about growth product growth strategies. And I hope that you guys can each take away something from this topic. It's a topic that's very applicable to every business that is being built. It's how to actually grow your customer base, grow your revenue. And I hope you find it useful. First, Chantal passed this along, but we'll be using Slido today to run the Q&A. So you can scan the QR code or use the code at the bottom there on slido.com to find our poll. And we'll be going through the Q&A at the end. You can also ask questions live here, but if you have something that comes up during the presentation, you can note it there and then also upvote, downvote questions. So we'll sort of be able to get to the ones that are the most pressing at the end. A little bit about me before we get into it. As mentioned, I'm a product designer. I'm a startup and product enthusiast. I just love building things and seeing how things can be improved and built upon. I most recently worked as a venture builder where I built and scaled businesses for large corporates across Europe and the Middle East. So I've experienced a lot of early stage product development startup work. And I'm also moving back here. I've become a mentor in Product Calgary. I've done some mentorship there. I joined the Hub as well to give back. And outside of work, just a fan of good food, good company, games, and sports. And I love getting outdoors when I have the chance. So looking forward to the winter sports season here in Calgary. Before we can dig into it, I want to give a bit of a framework. Frameworks are essentially ways to structure thinking, and we all use them sort of in everyday life, whether you're shopping or deciding what to eat for dinner or whether to go to the office or not. In terms of the product management sphere and the growth sphere, there's a lot of frameworks out there, and there are two things I want to just quickly touch on before I dig into it, because I'm going to share a lot of information here today. The one side of things is that it's easy to get overwhelmed by the amount of frameworks out there and the amount of content out there. And my advice is to pick one or two frameworks that you think are applicable, even from this presentation, and don't necessarily think that you have to apply all of these to be successful. Look at where you're at with your business today, maybe what your business actually is, right? I'm trying to keep this broad as possible because I know we have different people in the room here. So for me, if you take one or two things away, frameworks that you want to try to practice, then that's a win for me. And I would caution against trying to fit everything into your strategy at once. The other caution I wanted to give here is that frameworks are not everything. A lot of them take nuance and they take knowledge on how to actually properly apply, because you can't copy and paste the strategy from one company and necessarily use it for your own, the same way for your own business. And so a lot of it takes just thought. That's part of what I'm here for, is to help businesses apply frameworks in the right way for their business and know how to move them forward. But that's the other sort of caution I give, is that they're not the one size fits all solution that they may be put out to be. So use them with a grain of salt. And without further ado, here we go. This quote is sort of the foundation for the talk today. Historically, there's been different waves in product development work. Early on, a lot of the challenge, especially early mid-90s, in building software products was around technical feasibility, whether you can actually build the product you have in mind. Later on, like as the technology sort of advanced, the main challenge was building a great product, right? Seamless user experience, great design, beautiful layouts, nice websites, those things became more applicable, and that was sort of the epitome of building a good product. But nowadays, a lot of those barriers to entry have been lowered. It's easier than ever to start a tech company, to start a tech project. And really the defensibility of your business comes down to, are people actually using your product or not? And that is really what is driving a lot of business advancement today. especially with the use of AI, which even, pushes down the necessity to even know how to code or program. So yeah, it's becoming more than ever to understand growth and user acquisition as a strategy. Here's the agenda for the talk today. I'm going to start with a bit of a high-level overview of growth as a discipline. This is more when you're operating at scale. A lot of companies you may have seen, tech companies have growth teams that are their own sort of discipline outside of marketing, outside of sales. So I'm going to quickly talk about that. Then we're going to get into some frameworks, some 101. And then specific growth tactics that are more applicable to early stage to late stage companies. And then at the end, just going to touch quickly on how to actually measure sustainable growth to avoid not compromising things when you're trying to grow your business. So I found this interesting story about the first growth team from this individual who was an early employee at Facebook. Chamath, I guess he did record this podcast recently or a few years ago, but he was an early employee, was sort of in between business operations and marketing, and was trying to find his space in Facebook, and had the feeling that he was sort of going to get fired because he wasn't contributing much. And he went to the COO at the time, Sheryl Sandberg, and said, "Hey, what if I just sort of make a team that works across functions to just try to grow Facebook?" And they had back and forth, and she asked, like, "What would you call this team?" And he says, "Oh, I don't know. I'll just call that growth. We'll just try to grow. I'll be the head of growing stuff." And that's sort of the lore about how growth teams were formed. He became, at least in part, responsible for the trajectory of Facebook in their early days. Since then, a lot has changed, and there have been like ongoing market influences that have changed how we understand growth in businesses. One is that the lines between different people responsible for growth has blurred. Traditionally, if you build a physical product, you'd have the R&D division that would build the product, and you'd have the sales team that would sell it. If you sold refrigerators, you'd have the team that builds refrigerators, and you have some people that sell them. Now, in today's technology on the internet, there's a lot of blurring between actually getting customers and having people use your product, and so it's becoming unclear who's responsible for which part of the business in many cases, especially at larger teams. The other second thing here is that data has become ubiquitous across teams as well, from marketing to tech to finance. And there's no excuse, I guess, these days in terms of using data to actually understand the core functionality of your business and using metrics as a way to guide your strategy. Data is increasingly accessible from when people click on a website to which button they click, where they came from, which lead channel they came from, right? How long they stay on your website. You can track all these things ethically as well. But yeah, the accessibility of data has really transformed how we understand what drives growth in business. And then the third thing here is digitization. Just as people become more aware of the internet and digital products, there's a lot of cross-pollination between products, ways to connect and integrate products together that have opened up new channels for growth that were previously not there with brick and mortar businesses or physical products. Just to touch on the ownership, this is some of the complexity that comes in with growth. You have a lot of people working on a similar topic, from the product team to marketing to sales, customer success, and product marketing, and they're all working on growth. And so a lot of companies at scale struggle with how to actually structure teams that they have ownership over their own departments, right, and can actually drive growth. But this is sort of part of the blurring of happening in the space. I also want to touch briefly on the importance of growth, not only as a importance in growing your business, but how a compound effect really leads to market awareness. There are 4 points here. One is around distribution, that the more your product is distributed, the more defensible you are against threats, against other people that are coming into the same industry and space you are. User bases are great moats, right? If people are using our product, they're not likely going to switch unless it's like a compelling change. And so as you distribute more, your business is more defensible. which leads to more distribution because you have more of a critical mass there on your platform. As you grow as well, there's more resources available to you, whether that's funding, whether that's just cash, whether that's user base, and you can reinvest that in the business and grow more. Also, as you grow, you learn more about how your company works and how it actually grows, right? And then you can use those learnings to actually invest back in your business and grow more as well. And then growth just means more growth. The more your company grows, the better, more brand awareness you have, the more people will naturally hear about your product, even in ways that you didn't plan. And so that I think we all kind of understand this inherently, but this is just to highlight sort of the compound effect that having an effective growth strategy can have on your business. So all that said, let's get into some of the nitty gritty here on some of the growth strategies. Any good growth strategy starts with establishing a product that is actually growable. And this, I think, is often missed. It's the basics of product development. But many people rush towards a growth strategy. Oh, I need more funding. I need more money. But the question often comes down to, well, is there an actual fit, the need for your business in the first place? And these three areas of tracking are what is often referred to as product market fit, or healthy sign that your business product is actually fitting the need in the market. Retention engagement refers to how are people using your product frequently and how often are they using it. Retention can differ by what the product is. If it's daily active user, weekly active user, monthly active user, or even yearly. But the question there is, after people have used your product, are they actually coming back, right? Acquisition is around, are you getting people through the door effectively? And we'll talk about this later as well, at a cost-effective way, right? Is the cost of what it takes to get a customer less than the cost of what they're paying you, right? Do you have a healthy acquisition there? And then monetization, how are you effectively monetizing your user base to actually drive your business expansion? So before we even talk about growth strategies, it's important to recognize that these are three areas that are worth focusing on before even discussion about growth can really happen. And some of that, this is a lot of experimentation with different acquisition channels, monetization strategies, even the product itself. But this is what a lot of early stage product work needs to be, is nailing down these three areas so that you can really have a strong business to grow and build upon. Once you're confident in that, what happens is just a lot of experimentation and growth on top of that. So having a process for iterating on your product, iterating on your acquisition channels, even iterating on your monetization strategy in order to tweak what's working and sort of know how to scale it. This sort of in turn helps you solidify what's known as the growth model, how you understand growth of your business. And the more you go through these cycles, the more you'll understand what levers to pull to drive growth at different points. And then as you go through this, you just learn a lot about your users and the psychology of how they find your product, how they use it. These all feed into each other to help you really iterate and scale what's already working. And once you're sort of growing at scale, the idea is to form interdepartmental teams that work on this together, rather than having a team that's just focused on growth, involving engineers, involving designers, involving product people in that conversation on how to actually experiment, iterate on what's working in your business and expand it is important to really democratize the growth topic and not leave it up to one department or one person. And this really helps you embed this idea of growth into your team more widely. Another framework that is quite popular these days is the idea of product-led growth versus sales-led growth. The idea of product-led growth stems from the concept that you can build a product that drives its own growth rather than having a need for a sales team. This is obviously more cost-effective if the product naturally sells itself and you don't need to pay a salesperson. Then it just leads to better customer acquisition. This is not perfect for every business. This typically goes for people that can sign up for a free trial by themselves. They don't need a demo, right? They can do a freemium, like 30-day trial. Versus sales-led growth, which often requires demos, contracts, negotiations, relationship building, and a higher deal volume. So Some examples from product-led growth companies compared to sales-led growth. I like to use Microsoft as like a sales-led growth organization, because they have a large sales team. They work with businesses across the board, and when they roll out a new product, it's just a matter of having their sales team push it. Versus companies like Slack, they drove their early growth by having people jump on the platform and use it, and then invite their teams, right? So Slack didn't actually have any salespeople. They just had people use the product and invite their coworkers and build up, the user base, and their growth happened naturally as people use the product more. Now, notoriously, Teams actually has more users than Slack does, and so it was sort of just a realization that sales-led growth is not bad. It's just like it's a matter of preference, and Microsoft had a distribution base where they could just sort of turn on the faucet and have Teams explode and take over Slack's user base or user count. Some other examples are Canva versus PowerPoint or Notion versus Microsoft Loop. These companies, so Notion, I will just quickly touch on as well. Similar to Slack, they started with personal note-taking as the core functionality, and then they offered business and team functionality in their product in order to onboard larger organizations. And so by having someone use the product and then invite their colleagues, they already basically got sales for that business without having to actually do direct sales through the front door. Another topic I will touch on briefly here is the idea of growth loops. This is something we're going to cover more in the workshop next week. So members from the hub will be able to join and sort of apply this directly to their business, and I'll walk people through this. But the idea is that it's similar to product-led growth in that a growth loop is a strategy on how to design your product so that as the use of your product grows, the organic growth comes as a result. So I'll use the example of a funnel. So typically with a sales funnel, you run an ad campaign, right? You spend more money and more people get through the funnel of clicking on the link, trying your product, paying for it. You pay money at the top and users hopefully come out the bottom. But funnels are notoriously hungry, right? You have to keep spending money to keep driving users. And a more sustainable and scalable way to actually grow users is through what's called these growth loops, where there's an input of a new user, there's an action that they take that drives an output that is reinvested. And one example is the idea of is Pinterest. So Pinterest in their early stages use this quite effectively, that when people join the platform, when you would search on Google for things, you'd get a Pinterest board potentially, or Pinterest links. And that would drive you, even if you weren't looking for Pinterest, you'd be like, oh, this is cool. Like, I want to look into this. What they have here, right? Then once you activate, you try to scroll down. Oh, you have to make an account to actually see more. Okay, so then they drive users. And then as users save content, that actually boosts their ranking in social engines, search engines, right? Which drives more users that find them on a search engine. So Pinterest basically got a free user without having to pay for advertising, because it's a content-driven loop, a cycle, that the more users they have on board, the more content there is available, and the higher ranked they are in search traffic, which means that more people find them on search engines. So this is a really powerful model about how to drive growth in your business without having to consistently spend money, because as people use your product more, you become more visible, right? And I'll be digging into this next week with people in the hub in the workshop. I'm going to touch on the idea of growth strategies by company stage. So I know here in the room we have companies that are some in early ideation, some are already getting some traction, and some were heading more to scalability and growth. And your strategy for growth needs to adjust as your business grows. What works in an early stage is not necessarily going to work for you in mid-stage or scaling strategy. So I'm going to quickly touch on what are some practical tactics for folks in the room, depending on where they are in their business. This is one way to sort of view it is the 3 stages of business: traction, transition, and growth. They each have different goals. Early on, when you're first trying to get traction, your goal is to find the product market fit where you have healthy retention, people coming back to use your product. You have profitable acquisition of your product, that you're paying less than what people are paying you for them to use it, and that you have a good monetization strategy that is sort of a fit between these three areas. The key metric is retention, right? That's what you should be focusing on early on, is are people coming back to use your product? That is the main measure of whether it's actually delivering value. Your volume of what driving growth is basically turning on the faucet and trying different things to see what works. So in terms of how many channels you're using, you may try different channels. I'll show examples later of different channels to use. But you really want to say, okay, are we a content-based acquisition? Are we driving people through advertisements, partnerships, through sales, right? Early on, it's a matter of experimentation to focus on one. And usually you only have, one or two people working on this in your team because you're a small company. Once you've identified what's working, basically the fire. Your key metric is your growth rate. And something I mentioned here, your cost CPAs, your cost per acquisition. So how much it costs you to get a customer to sign up for your product. And compare that to the lifetime value, which is how much that customer will pay you over the lifetime of their use of your product. So if they stay for an average of 6 months and they're paying $10 a month, that's a $600 lifetime value. You can compare that to how much it costs to get them through the door to see if you're growing at a healthy rate. Ideally, you're getting that paid back under 3 months. Transition and focus is on volume, turning up the faucet, investing more into what's working, and really optimizing in that one channel. It may surprise you, but the majority of companies that grow, 80% of their growth or their customer base comes from one main channel. And so early on, it's good to experiment, but once you find what's working, it's good to really invest in there. Optimization, what it means by macro and micro here. Optimization of that funnel. So at a high level early on, you're trying on more broad changes to maybe different landing pages, different marketing tactics, different wording, language, right? How you get people through the door. Once you're finding what's working, you're sort of fine-tuning what's working, and it becomes more of a micro thing. You might experiment still with some different marketing tactics, but you're really sort of narrowing your focus. And then once you're really scaling and growing, it's just a matter of turning on the fire hose and continuing to do those micro adjustments to improve your funnel all the way through. One thing I want to get to now is the idea of channels. And I talked about product market fit as being important. There's also this framework called the 4 fits, which I like because it shows how just building a good product is not enough. You need to build a product that it also matches the channel that you're selling it to, which matches your business model that you're profiting from. So right now we're going to dig into product channel fit. That's the main topic today, but business model and the market the business model also needs to sort of align with all of these strategies. How do you actually find the first growth strategy? So early stage, what does that experimentation look like? So for better or for worse, there are 4 main growth channels to pick from. Better because it makes it easier to sort of experiment. There are more outside of this that are sort of one-off growth channels like word of mouth or I don't know, posting on Reddit or getting your family to sign up. But if you want to sort of grow beyond that, there's only a few that really you can choose from. This makes it easier to choose from, but it obviously means that there's more competition for these things. The main 4 are content, performance marketing, virality, and sales. So content is similar to what I shared about Pinterest, that you go through search engine or social media content creation. Another example would be Yelp, that as people post reviews of websites, that it drives more search traffic through Google. So their main sort of way to grow their business is through content. Performance marketing is running ads on search engines or on social media. Booking.com notoriously or famously did this really well when they started at driving traffic through their search performance marketing spend. Virality comes from word of mouth referrals invites. Airbnb did this early on. They had a strong referral program for their first users. If you referred someone, you get a basically free night stay, I think it was. And they use sort of this viral approach to drive growth beyond word of mouth. And then sales team, like I mentioned, is having a dedicated sales team. This can work depending on your target audience. And how to actually choose which one. Typically, your business lends itself well to one of these channels already. If it's a business where users naturally generate public content, then content strategies may be a good way to lean into that. If you generate revenue directly from new users, so if you're like a e-commerce website and a user generates profit through a sale, then that's probably better fit with performance marketing because their action about using your product is much more quickly tied to the actual revenue. Virality, typically this is mostly used in social media platforms where you need a critical mass that the more people that are using it, the better the product is. So Snapchat, you think about LinkedIn, the product's better when your friends are using it, right? And or it's just fun to share. If it's like videos or like short form video like TikTok, right? That grew through virality as well because those things are just fun to share and the shareability was built into their product experience. Sales might be best when you're trying to land big accounts, when there are multiple decision makers involved, and there are a lot that require relationship building and sort of that trust over time. And especially businesses that are not familiar with software, maybe with construction or agriculture or different things, require more relationship building, and people may not be willing to just sign up on the website. So that being said, your industry may not necessarily dictate your channel strategy. So here are some examples of companies that were successful by category with different strategies. So if you look at the travel space, I mentioned Booking.com as having effective performance marketing strategy. Airbnb grew through virality, word of mouth, and then Expedia used a really effective content strategy early on. So your industry doesn't necessarily have to dictate which content strategy you use, but your business has to be set up in a way that takes advantage of that, right? You have to recognize what is my main channel here and how do we integrate that product channel fit into the business strategy, right? Whether that's leveraging SEO, right, in content creation, whether that's building shareability into the product to boost virality, or whether that's having a more targeted performance marketing strategy, keywords, website, domains to pick, things like that. Beyond that main channel, one framework that I like to use to look at growth holistically is this race car framework. Businesses will typically have their main growth engine. So like I said, you want to find one of those engines, one of those channels that really works for you, that drives the majority of your growth. Outside of that, you may have one-off events that accelerate growth but don't last. You can think of like PR pushes as this, media publications, launching a product on Product Hunt and getting people to download it. These are they do drive growth, but they're not sustainable in the long term. You think of fuel, it's important to know what your fuel for your business is. If you're working in performance marketing, your fuel is money for ads. If you're working in sort of optimizing content, then your fuel is content creation by your users. And so it's just like, that's what your engine needs to run the business if you're growing that strategy. And then lubricants are just optimizations across the whole funnel or a whole user experience that make that growth engine run more efficiently. And this is a lot of work that is done by growth teams at larger companies, is how to optimize that existing engine and make it more effective. Last one here is more later stage companies. Each channel you have will have diminishing returns over time. And achieving growth in the long term requires expanding your growth strategy. One of the people I follow here uses the analogy of S-curve. So you may see a boost in initial acquisition when you open a new channel or you expand, but eventually it diminishes. So this example is from Eventbrite that I can talk about. They initially grew about as a ticketing platform and people just sharing events, right? Easy, kind of like natural use of the product. People would make events, they would share them, people would get on Eventbrite and make their own events. Eventually, they found that the majority of events that are made, I think over 90%, are free tickets. So it was hard for Eventbrite to really monetize on that because their monetization strategy comes from more of the paid events. So they had to invest heavily into a sales team that landed bigger events and conferences in order to drive profitability. So they really invested in that SEO and the sales strategy. And then now they're currently on this loop where they at least like investigated the idea of paid acquisition, where event creators can also advertise on Eventbrite. So people would come to Eventbrite to be advertised to find events and not just go there based on an event link. So that's a new strategy they were looking at as a way to expand growth beyond sort of just people making events and sharing them. But this is an example of how you need to, keep layering on these growth strategies once you see the diminishing returns of what has been working. So there's a balance there. I know I mentioned one. This is a matter of just being aware of like when that main strategy is waning, looking at the market, knowing your competitors, knowing your users, and finding ways to continually growing despite the diminishing use of the product or the effectiveness of that channel. Sorry. Yeah, just at the last part of here, I want to talk about authentic growth because when you talk about growth, it can be easy to just look at growth at all costs. And there are a lot of companies that were effective at growing, but either died out shortly after. I think of like Quibi for short-term video or a Clubhouse, right? That was around for a bit, then just sort of died. How do you know that your growth is actually healthy and that it actually is repeatable? So these are 4 aspects I want to quickly run through. Meaningful growth talks about growth that is valuable for you and the user and the company. Sustainable growth, growth that can be maintained over a long period of time. Repeatable growth is not just a flash in a pan or one-time boost, but replicable. And then as social innovators and innovative impact-focused entrepreneurs, I want to touch on impactful growth. How do you ensure your business actually leads to more impact in the sphere you're working in? So in terms of meaningful growth, there is a sort of Venn diagram of growth that's beneficial to the users and growth that's beneficial to your business. Dark patterns are patterns of design that lead to user growth, but that actually does not bring any value. You think of products that maybe it's hard to actually cancel your credit card subscription, right? They hide buttons, in different pages, or they make you email them to cancel your account. These are dark patterns where it looks like it's healthy growth, but the growth or it's valuable to the company because it's hard for you to leave once you're a user, but it's not valuable to the user themselves. So these are called dark patterns in user design, product design. On the other side, you could artificially grow your business just by making your product free, right? Or driving down your cost, your what you charge. However, when your growth is valuable to the user and you get that growth, but it's not actually valuable to you, then your business is not sustainable. And some key metrics to look at here, I mentioned were customer acquisition cost. How much does it cost you to get a customer through the door? What is their average lifetime value, right? Based on what they actually pay you. And what is that payback period like? And is that actually a healthy growth metric? In terms of sustainable growth, this is more around the actual retention. So we talked about this before, but if you actually just grow users, but they're never coming back to the platform, their growth is short-lived. So you get this big boost in new people using it, but if they don't come back, then it's all for nothing, right? And so some metrics to look at when you're looking at retention are daily, weekly, monthly active users, depending on the use case. So a product like social media, often they track daily active users or weekly active users. How many people use this product on a daily basis, on a weekly basis? Other products like accounting software may only be used once a quarter, right? So then they would look at the quarterly active users, right? Or even tax software, maybe used once a year. So you don't need to always have to optimize for daily or weekly. Look at your cycle of your product use and see if this is healthy over time, right? Is it, and that ideally the use of your product is growing as more people come on the platform. Repeatable growth. So one-off growth boosts are actually nice. So I would say that I focus on scalable growth strategies, but I think it's important to have a balance here of things that don't scale and things that do. Doing like a PR hit or a product hunt launch and getting a big boost of users is nice, but it's hard to replicate that again, right? It wanes off over time, and then you're left with nothing again, right? So it's important to find a balance here, probably between 90% of your focus on the sort of repeatable growth versus one-off bumps. Those one-off pushes may be effective in bringing in users that would otherwise not be part of your channel strategy. They might help you expand or identify new ways to grow, but they cannot be repeated very easily. So it's important to have a balance there to drive repeatable growth. And then impactful growth. This actually, I guess, will be expanded upon next week in one of our upcoming events on how to actually measure the social impact of your business. But what I wanted to touch on here is that when you're celebrating wins of your organization, when you're actually measuring performance of your team, it's important not to just focus on the growth metrics, but also your impact metrics, and to celebrate wins in both your the growth of your business and in the changing of your industry, to reinforce that mindset within your team, so that you're not leaving the social impact by the wayside just by growing pure profit and user base. We did a land acknowledgement at the beginning, and at the end, I just want to give a content acknowledgement to the people that I got content from as I was preparing for this. These are all great growth leaders in the product space, and so if you're interested in reading more of their work, I'd recommend giving them a follow on LinkedIn. A lot of them have their own websites and newsletters. A lot of what I took is from Reforge, which is I guess, digital course, education for product and tech people. I did a few of their courses, and they're top notch. They have a lot of industry leaders there. So I would also look at their blog and their website if you want to dig into these topics further. And yeah, that's it for me. I know that was a lot. Hopefully there are a few things that hit you or you want to talk about further or ask about further. Next week, I'll be digging into these topics further on how to actually unlock product-led success and not solely rely on spending money to drive growth, but digging into how to actually design your product in a way that drives growth organically. And so for those who are members, we have a link, I believe, that you can use to register for this workshop. It'll be next Thursday from 1 to 3 p.m. at the Hub. And with that, I'll hand it over to Chantel before diving into the Q&A.
Yay! Thank you, Matthias. I feel like I learned a lot. I hope everybody on the call also felt like they learned a lot. I wish we could do sound effects. I don't know. Yay, someone's clapping. Yay! Thank you. Good job. So we're going to run into a Q&A here if you would like. But before, just wanted to Matthias already said it, but we have our workshop happening next week. That's a little bit more hands-on with the topic. So for those of you that are members, you should already have that link. If not, send me an email. If you're not a member but would like to become one, feel free to let me know as well. We also have another event happening on December 11th. That's the practical tools for capturing your impact. So for you folks that are impact focused, feel free to register for that. I'll put the link to all of our upcoming events here. And we also have a holiday party on December 17th. So if you'd like to join us there, feel free to. So I shared a link a few times in the chat to have your questions, to put your questions in there. Um, I think I saw like a couple of them already in there. Continue to add your questions and Matthias will take it away.
Yeah. I will we'll jump into these ones, I guess, already, and then open the floor once we have this done for any people in the call that want to do a verbal question. So we got two here. One, early stage traction retention was refined as a key metric. What about products that don't have retention? Wedding dress, funeral, seasonal items. Good question. I would say with seasonal items, there is a level of retention season over season, similar to what I mentioned about like accounting software or tax software. It's kind of hard to drive that because they either come back in the spring or they don't to use it. There are ways to sort of have a strategy around that. Around one-time purchases, one way you could look at it is the idea of a promoter score. A lot of the ones that are one-off purchases, like your wedding dress or funeral, are very susceptible to word of mouth or other, like more shareable experiences. So people who have a good experience with your business will be more likely to actually refer it. So rather than them coming back themselves, like the measure of retention would be their friends or their family coming back to the same place. So one way you could use a metric of retention is around net promoter score, which idea is this question like, how likely are you to refer this service to your friend? That's, has upsides and downsides, but I would say there are ways to track sort of word of mouth strength, which is a method of retention in those businesses where it may be harder to track because they're one-off purchases. So hopefully that helps. Quiznos, love it. One of the key causes of companies failing is growing too fast. Growth compounds cost too. Any tips to avoid growing too quickly? Yeah, I think I covered this at the end. I would look at sort of those four main signs of healthy growth around the actual core metrics of your business, around retention, around the acquisition costs, around the lifetime value, and around your impact actually as well. So those are sort of key metrics to look at. There's this idea of vanity metrics. So vanity metrics are metrics for your business that look really nice, but actually don't drive any business value. This could be app downloads. This could be website visits. This could be like activity basically in your application that doesn't actually mean you're doing well as a business. Like people download your app a lot, that doesn't really drive necessarily like mean that you're profitable or that those downloads are leading to actual purchases. So that's like a sign where, okay, if you're optimizing for downloads or for website visits, then you're going to look like it's growing, but it doesn't actually lead to healthy profitability and business metrics, right? So I would recommend moving more to metrics that are more closely related to the actual health of your business, around retention, around conversion rates for purchase behavior, and then actually like how much it costs to get them in the door, right, as well.
We have a question about if the slides will be shared after.
Yes, yeah, I plan to share the slides. I will also link for the frameworks that I mentioned, some additional articles and reference to people who sort of are thought leaders in that space so that people can dig into that on their own time, because I know I went through pretty quick. So if there's any framework that you want to dig into, I'll provide the links and the references so that you can read more about that on your own time.
Great. Last call for any other questions?
I believe we'll share the recording as well, right? Or
We can.
yeah.
Do you have a favorite growth story for either your experience or seeing others?
Oh, that's fun.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'll do two because there was one where I really hoped it would work and it didn't, and then maybe some actually worked. I was working on an investment app in the UAE to help people save for retirement, and we identified a need for also HR departments to use a retirement savings platform as a way to retain people, employees in the region in a way where, um, well, a lot of companies had trouble retaining talent because there's a lot of competition for these high skilled jobs. Anyways, we were primarily focused on acquiring users through businesses, so selling to HR departments and getting their whole basically team to sign up as users through sales. I had recently heard about a growth strategy called B to C to B, where you sell to consumers of a business and then hope that because they use it, you can basically acquire the business. So similar to what I shared about Slack or Notion, that you just sell to the individual who uses it at work, and then they invite their team, and then you get the whole company without doing sales. So my idea was, oh, what if we, offer this as a retirement savings platform for people, and then once we have, a bunch of users that are from a certain company, we can just go in and say, hey, you have 20 employees using this to save for retirement. Why don't you just make it across the board for all your employees? I was really pushing for this because I thought it'd be a fun, like, backdoor growth strategy. Unfortunately, like due to legislation, we couldn't sell or like have users sign up and participate in the investment funds because they were trust funds and made on a company basis. Um, but yeah, that was like one way that I was trying to push creative growth strategy. Um, I would say one of the companies that I've seen do this the most successfully is Loom. And Loom is a browser extension. It's one of my favorite products, where you basically just click on in the corner and you record a short form video for your colleagues. If you're doing a lot of, yeah, if you want basically to skip a meeting and just send an update, you can send like a minute, video recording and save yourself half an hour of sitting in a call. So I love that. And they did a really effective job of building virality into the product because as you share the video with someone, they view it on the Loom website, and then they're already, that's how they find out about the product, right? And then they either comment or they can reply with another video. And so I just love the way that they built growth in product use, and it became a very, like, it grew insanely fast, right? Especially among teams. I talked about that B to C to B approach. If I send a Loom to my boss, right? Okay, then he may start using it with his colleagues, and then they send it to their colleagues. And it's a way of sort of like corporate viral product use, which I think is a interesting use case. So anyways, that's one that I like to point to as a company that grew well through a really good growth strategy. But lots more if you have the time for them. But mentioned performance marketing. I'm sure how to set up ads. You mentioned booking.com, use it for product-led growth. Yeah, so it's actually, yeah, it's I think it's just a matter of using it. I've set up ads on LinkedIn, on Google, and through Meta. So Meta basically lets you do it through multiple products at once with Instagram and Facebook and manage it from the same place. You basically just find create a business account, set up your ad copy, your target keywords, target profiles. Each business sort of that you would run ads on has their own way of doing things. With LinkedIn, you can target by title, by company size, different things, versus on Google, you're targeting keywords. On Instagram, Facebook, you can target more directly with profiles, right? But you're not going to maybe find the people you're looking for. So which platform you actually do the performance marketing on also depends on your target audience. You can do the keyword research on Google ahead of time to see how much it would cost to run an ad for certain words, right? So you can sort of get an idea of how competitive that specific word or that specific search phrase is before you jump in, to say, okay, is it worth doing an ad campaign if I have to spend $60 per click, right, for this keyword that is highly competitive. So I would say that you can do part of it is just doing that research around how expensive is running ads on each of the platforms. I'm able to reach the people that I'm looking for, and then just experimenting with different platforms to see which keywords, which user profiles drive that conversion rate. So, but if you happy to chat about more if you're interested in setting up an ad campaign. Yeah, they're fun.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for your questions. Thank you, Matthias, for sharing your knowledge. You can expect an email from us. It will include the slides and the recording, but also a feedback form. We'll be doing a few more of these. Matthias will be doing a few more of these next year, and so you're kind of or testers. Let us know what was helpful, what you'd like to see in the future one. Maybe if anything was unhelpful, whatever comes to mind, we'll take it all. So please look out for that, and we really appreciate your feedback. We'll be doing a bunch more of these things in the new year, but we still have a few more coming up this year. Next week, the workshop with Matthias and some other events around measuring your impact and celebrating the holidays. So I just wanted to say thank you all for joining us, for being so engaged. Yay, more sound effects. And hopefully we'll see you next week. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Great. Yeah, that was well. Oh. Hi, did you have a question, Nicola? Or
I was just trying to. All good.
I think I was on twice. No, that was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
All right,
thank you. You're
thanks.
welcome.
Bye.
Wow, wow, wow.
Yeah, we want to end the recording. Yay. Or leave, I
I think
think.
it's